right? We would love to think that we are conscious human beings, that we are analytical, that we're leading with logic. And the reality of it is you're never doing that, right? You are confirming your emotion with logic.
Mic drop.
All right, I know we were just joking around about not labeling these as episodes, but episode 26, we're going to talk about mastering communication, the science of influence, trust, and human behavior. I was actually just having a big team meeting on this, and I was talking about, like, hey, one of the most important skills that anybody can learn is mastering the ability to communicate, mastering human psychology. And it's not just from getting better at sales or getting better at marketing. I think this is something that's going to help you at home with your relationships. This is going to help you with, if you're not in a relationship, maybe finding a partner, getting jobs. Like, there's so many things that I think foundationally are built around this. So I have like a lot of notes. I'm going to kind of go back and forth on this today because I was trying to get like other information as well from, like, I was like in the rabbit hole of like, okay, how does, like, what is the framework maybe that a therapist would follow? What is there's a good book by, I think his name is Stephen Ross, Never Split the Difference. And he was an FBI negotiator, right? And then there's another guy that I follow, what's his name? Jefferson something. He's like a trial attorney, right? And he really has a lot. I just actually got his book. I haven't read it yet. But he talks a lot about, obviously, just the ability to communicate. And, like, I've always, for me, have made it a big priority of investing into the skill set. When I was younger, it's like, I remember I sold Kirby vacuums door to door for a while, Cutco knives. So I kind of went through a little handful of some different jobs when I was really young. But like my second job that I worked at gym wise, I got into sales, right? I got hired as a fitness manager and I started learning sales. And I had this guy, Jason Jamie, was like, I would say probably the only person I've had in my career that I felt like was like an actual mentor to me. It turned out to be quite a little bit of a weirdo, but he actually still owes me money. I think he owes me like $3,000 from a job that he disappeared on. But whatever. Honestly, I looked up to him a lot. He had the gift of gab. He just had this ability to just like convince anybody of anything, right? And just like, not in like an unhealthy way. And I think Alex Hormozy says this, that like the difference between influence and manipulation is intent, right? Like what makes someone have a lot of influence or what makes someone manipulate other people is just the intent behind what you're trying to do. So the skill set is something I share with coaches all the time. And I think it's important for all humans to really make it a bigger priority to like understand some of these things, right? So I actually saw this quote that I like too. It was like, communication isn't a talent, it's a nervous system regulation, psychology, and the pattern recognition, right? It's going to get me into some of these things I'm going to talk about today with like body language and tone, trust, rapport, etc., whatever it might be, listening more than talking. My biggest thing I always thought when I was younger that I was like, oh, someone that's really good at sales or really good at influencing or even manipulating, depending on the intent, like I said, has this gift of gab. They have this ability to just talk to people and make them convinced of whatever they're talking about, right? And I always was very attracted to that. I was like, wow, like that is something I think would be a really cool skill set to have. Now, that being said, I think as my job progressed through sales and then I got into management, it's funny, from sales, I was trying to convince people to buy a product or service, right? My experience, the one thing that I would say, and this is probably my opening thing I would say, is having conviction. You really, really have to believe in what you're talking about. Conviction can get you in trouble a little bit with some of the active listening part, because like when you really are truly convinced of something, it's really hard to be empathetic of an opposing or, a disagreeing opinion of somebody else, right? But I think in order to feel what someone is talking about, there needs to be a feeling of conviction. Like I need to talk about it in such a core way that I'm like, I'm telling you, like, I'm not wrong. But like the slippery slope, like I said, is sometimes we lose a little bit of empathy. We lose the ability to hear. We become a little bit closed-minded. But I think out of all things that I say is like kind of at the core of it is like we really have to have a lot of conviction behind what we're doing, right? So communication is not talking more. It's making people feel seen, safe, and understood. So I think when you think about this, just like art of listening in general, right? Like a lot of times, coming back to this gift to gab thing, when you're trying to influence somebody or manipulate, whatever the intent will be, I'm going to bring that up a lot today, or convince somebody of anything, you obviously need to talk, right? So as my sales training for myself is kind of changed with the company, or of like how the coaches talk to clients, how the salespeople talk to prospects, things like that. I've changed more towards like learning that when you're talking, you're asking questions. You're leading with curiosity. You're not leading with the answers, right? Like you don't always have the answers, because the goal of a good psychologist, a good therapist, a good salesperson, a good communicator is let them answer the question, right? And the way that you get them to answer the question, maybe towards the direction that you're trying to sell towards, is by asking the right questions, but leading with curiosity, right? So not always leading with the answers behind that, right? Um, Interesting stat that I think most of us maybe have heard, but most of us make a buying decision within 7 to 30 seconds of meeting somebody. And this is where I think how you present yourself, your body language, your tone, your eye contact, your hand gestures, like all these things really make a difference, because if you look closed off, or you look like you don't care, you show up late, you dress like a bum, out of all the things, I would say that's probably the one that I fall into rap too. Like, this guy looks like a bum. But all those things obviously are going to make an impact on like how someone views you, right? Because a lot of our, not a lot, majority of our buying decisions and decisions in life happen at an unconscious level, right? We would love to think that we are conscious human beings, that we are analytical, that we're leading with logic. And the reality of it is you're never doing that, right? You are confirming your emotion with logic. You make a buying decision based off emotion, right? There's obviously logic that's going to allow you to go, okay, now this makes sense, right? And that can happen either on the front end proactively, or that can happen after, when I go home after a buying decision. I bought for both company, I would say Mountain View, myself and my wife, a new car a couple weeks ago. And I remember going through the decision of like, okay, like we need to get you a car for us having a family in the future. Your car doesn't even work. It breaks down all the time. I'm always someone when it comes to gift shopping that I always kind of think about like, how do I, two birds, one stone type of mentality. And I was like, okay, like from a tax perspective, if I make this a company vehicle that I'm taking to work a couple days a week, driving from home office to work, she worked for the company, and hopefully next year is going to be working a lot more for the company, right, babe? Um, that I was like, well, if we buy a car that's over 6,000 pounds, like I can write that thing off, right? I'm not going to write off the full amount. I'm going to write off whatever the business use is, right? And then the personal use, it obviously would be our expense. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, like I can kind of think about multiple strategies. I went through a lot of logical thinking prior to that decision. So that's an example of like, I made that decision based off logic of like, okay, what's going to save us the most amount of money, even though it's going to cost me money. I'm not saying it's like free. What's going to be the thing that's obviously going to have the most utility or function, right? For us as a family with kids in the future, for me with work, the presentation. So even the way that I was talking about how someone dresses, I think how the car that someone drives, like all these things are optics. These are all perspectives. And I like the idea of like, I want to look professional too, right? Like there's going to be certain things that I care about more so than others, but like it's all part of the optics. My wife is the exact opposite. We were originally looking at like a 2020 to 2022 model, because I was like, hey, this is where most of the depreciations happen. We can get it at a good price. We took her to the dealership like a month or 6 weeks ago, and worst mistake I ever made. It's not a mistake, whatever, but just giving her a hard time. She fell in love with the 23 model. Right? It's like, I'm like, oh, fuck, this is a lot more than what we were looking at. It's not new, but it's a lot more than the 22 model. And she's an emotional person. She likes the color. She likes the feel. And like, that's what makes my wife so beautiful, is like, she's just an emotional creature, but are balancing between those two things. Right. So I give you guys kind of that story that like, we all make decisions. Some of us are more emotional. Some of us are more logic. I think depending on what it is will create on the continuum of emotional logic will create how much emotion you'll lead with. Right? If it's something you really don't care about or really not convinced about, you're going to lead with a lot more logic. If it's something you're like super excited about, if it's close, like we all have, I call these like financial weaknesses in life, that we just like kind of lose the ability to have reasoning. And I think like for me, it was actually always been kind of cars. Like I never really I cared about clothes for a little bit when I was in my early 20s. I was like, yeah, we're going out, we're getting a new fit, getting my hair cut every week. I was tanning at that time. I was buying new clothes at the mall. And then I started to get older. Then I met my wife. Not that that's an excuse. Men should always be trying to look good for their wife. But like I kind of cared less about clothes. I cared about how my body looked. I cared about my cars. And that I really didn't care. Like certain things I just don't care about. So those are things that I don't care about that I'm like, I can be more logical with. Things I do care about, I'm like less logical with, right? So just understand that's always a big thing, right? So trust and likability are often decided before logic even enters the room. People don't hear the words first, they feel your nervous system, right? And this is where a lot of the trust and rapport and the body language and the tone, like even before you start talking, people feel this presence, right? And this was something I talked about a lot with what was it? What was I talking about? Remote. Sorry, I was like, God, there was something I was talking about during the pandemic just now. When we went remote during the pandemic, like one of the things I've always said is like on the continuum of communication or like platforms or way to communicate, person to person is obviously in person is the best, right? Because I can see body language, I can hear the tone, I can hear the words, but there's this like unspoken thing that even science I don't think is fully figured out sometimes. But there's just like this frequency, there's this aura, there's something about a human that will either make you naturally dislike them or naturally like them, right? And I think that like as a communicator in life is like, what is the aura that you're giving off, right? Like for me, I've always said that like in certain situations, I've always kind of called this the chameleon effect. Is like I have friends from very different spaces. Like in the high school, I always said that like I had a lot of different friend groups, a lot of people that like I got along with, and it doesn't matter if it was the jocks and the athletes or the nerds or if it was the gangbangers, if it was the gothics. It does like I'm trying to figure out what are groups. Like I always got along with people, but I also one of the things that I've kind of like realized is like I really have to like have a good reason for like why I'm like I don't like this person, right? Either the way they treated me or treated somebody as a loved one, but like I've even had like I have like I would call an ex-best friend of mine, good friend for a very long time, did something stupid with my parents, like in an exchange buying a motorcycle. And I kind of just wrote him off, right? There's one thing that I do not like a line being crossed. And it's like talking or about my people that are close to me, right? So it's like my family, obviously, my parents, my brothers, my wife, my really close friends. Like I'm super, super protective of that. It's just always something I've kind of held on to. Like that's just how I operate. Like for me, people that are close to me, like I'm very territorial about. I've always been someone that kind of supports the underdog, but I've also been someone that's always been like this kind of older brother. I think just being an older brother, just a little bit of that just happens maybe organically. I'm like that at work, very protective of my team, very protective of my clients. I'm very protective of those things. And I've never really been someone that has made judgments on some people based off how they treat other people that maybe I don't know or have that like connection to. Which I don't know if that's wrong or right. Like, I think it obviously has influence of like, wow, he's kind of like a dick to those people, or he's a dick to his girlfriend, or like whatever it might be. But if I didn't know the other person, I had a hard time always convincing myself of like, well, they've never treated me wrong. So like, I'm not going to like change my relationship with them based off how they're treating other people or how they have treated other people. When in reality, it's like how you do one thing is how you do a lot of things. So I think there's some merit to understand, like, it is important to understand that. Like, you just choosing to disregard that is, maybe that's what led me to this situation. So no matter what, I'm kind of getting to like, I don't want to be rambling on too much. So the next section I want to talk about is the science of communication, right? Which is body, tone, and words. This is actually from that book that I was talking about, Never Split the Difference. And he talks about basically three things, right? That the first thing that most people are as communication works, right? 55% of communication is body language, right? 38% of it is tone. 7% of it is words. There's a name behind the principle, but Stephen Ross talks about this in his book. I hope that math is right. Does that make sense? 38, 7, 45. Yeah, that's 100%. Okay. So if you think about it, like just do the math and the numbers, over half of it is body language, meaning over half of the communication that we have in life is nonverbal. So think about how you dress. Think about your eye contact. Think about how you're shaking someone's hand. Is it this flimsy thing? Is it too rough? Think about how you're sitting. Are you sitting with an open chest? Are you sitting with your palms out? Are you sitting with your legs crossed? Or are you tucked? You can read a lot, right? And I try not to make all my judgment on it. Now knowing so much of kind of like how communication works, sometimes like almost like it's easy to get ahead of yourself of like, well, I don't like the feel of like, just, I didn't even talk to the person. Like something about that person just like makes me feel weird. But like understand that it is more than half of the decisions that we make unconsciously with a decision on somebody of how this communication is working between one another. So if you're like as a coach or as a parent or as a manager, as an owner of a business, as a salesperson, as a marketer, marketing maybe a little bit less because I think that's maybe not done in person as much, but like all the things you do, your body language is nonverbal and your body language is more than half of what you're talking about. The second one in line is your tonality. So if you think about this, when we think about communication at a very early level of my career, I thought, well, yeah, it's what you're saying. It's words, right? But I realized like, oh, it's like how I'm saying these words, right? So how I'm presenting myself, body language, the tone, am I having upwards inflection or am I talking slower, right? Am I talking like I'm narrating a documentary behind National Geographic? Am I an evening DJ? Okay. So there's so many ways to change how you communicate and the perception of how it's being received. Coming back to this kind of chameleon effect of like what I was talking about with like my high school career, just in life, of I would talk differently. I would have different tone. I would use different, what would be the term for this? Like lingo or tonality or like how I would talk, the type of words that I would using. Some people I cuss more around. Some people I don't cuss at all. Some people I'm a little bit more polite. Some people I'm a little bit more raw. And that happens like literally day to day, person to person, right? Like there's some clients and coaches that I have such a good relationship with. And we kind of have the same personality of like, little quirks that make us like, oh, that's funny. We have the kind of the same humor. This one doesn't have the same humor. This person is a little bit more emotional. This person's not. And how I talk to the coaches is different. How I talk to my clients is different. Obviously, I have a avatar that I've attracted towards of like the type of people that I can be a little bit more relaxed. I can throw a little bit more cuss words in there. I can make more jokes. I can have a little bit more fun. But that is not a bad thing if someone doesn't receive that well, right? So a lot of those are going to be kind of changing that, right? So body language, like I said, is going to be number one. So posture, eye contact, facial tension, breathing speed, movement quality, the physical distance, right? I've always said one of my best friends, when he would drink, he would get way too close to somebody when he would talk. Like, I'm like, dude, you're like breathing on my cheek right now. So like your physical distance is like, like learning how to like create an ambiance that is going to make somebody feel good. The neuroscience behind it is, well, I don't want to get into any of this. This is really stuff that I think some of these things I kind of just wrote down and copy and pasted and like, I don't think it really matters. Okay. High trust signals, open chest, slow movements, stillness over fidgeting, visible palms, slight head tilt when listening. Those are interesting facts. Low trust signals, closed posture, excessive gesturing, rapid nodding. Okay. And leaning away, and obviously facial expression. So calm body equals a calm room. Your physiology leads to the interaction. So those are a lot of the things that I kind of found that I think I kind of touched on already. So tone. This is, I think, one of the hidden ones for influence, right? Because you can make a lot of change and like this is coming back to now we're talking, right? So like, I'm going to get back to this listening part in a second, but like when you are talking, your body language and tone and the kind of the words that I'm talking about are going to make a difference, right? So tone communicates, number one, safety versus threat. There's a lot of like quotes in the communication world that talk about how it's like you are being perceived on like a nervous system level, right? Our body's first order of operation in life is to be safe. It wants to be safe, right? So if it senses fear, logical brain disappears. We are now becoming more emotional. Right? This is where we sometimes make emotional decisions. Emotional buying could be bad. Doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing. Sometimes we make them where we think there's urgency, the scarcity. Like a lot of times people are using this for the wrong intent to manipulate people to make a buying decision. But like if you sense a threat or sense fear or sense anything, you become this emotional thinker, right? So I think as when I'm trying to communicate this to you guys is like how communication works, understand how you're receiving or using. Right? If you're using this to create a decision or make a decision, hopefully to do it to influence people, there's nothing wrong with creating a little fear, right? Because sometimes, like, I'll give this as an example. I use the fear of inaction, not a lot, but I would say a good amount, right? So when I talk to people and I'm talking to a client, I have people that I'm like, okay, this person just booked a free complimentary hour. So it's an hour out of their time, and I know how valuable time is to most of us, to then hopefully see if this gym or this trainer or myself is the solution to the problem. They're here for a problem. There is enough pain to take time out of their day, even though it's free, right? So with pain, there's pain from a lot of things. But one of the big things when I talk about this in action is like sometimes I'll create a fear around like what would it feel like or what would happen if you didn't make a decision or didn't change? Like what if there was no action taken? How would you feel being where you're at? Same pain or the same weight or whatever, right? Like, hey, not improving in your races, whatever I'm training somebody for. So use it, understand it, but like the tone can obviously kind of ruin that. So the next thing is confidence versus insecurity. This is a big one that I think comes with confidence. I think comes from repetition. Repetition and education is going to give you confidence to talk. I feel very good selling training because number one, I have so much conviction behind it. It is the best thing that I've ever done for my life, and it's the best thing that anybody can do for their life. I understand this industry and I understand health, fitness, nutrition, stress, sleep at a very high level, right? There's plenty of people that are smarter than me. I'm not trying to say I'm the best at it, but like I'm at a confident enough level where I can speak with confidence, right? Like a lot of these episodes, even that like I talk on things, sometimes I like to have notes. Like today's a good example because I feel like, okay, it helps me have a little bit more structure and prevents me from rambling too much. And some of them, like I'm so confident in what I'm talking about with this that like I can just like ramble on and go. Now, if you don't have that skill, if you don't have that education, it becomes an insecurity. And the way you talk is going to be shown, right? Talking to somebody that's insecure, like if you've ever gone and bought a car, bought anything, and somebody's new to it, like you can just feel the insecurity. I remember I always tell this story that one of the what was this? This is probably about 3 cars ago. This is like 2018, 19, something like that. I leased an Audi. I wanted an Audi. I had an old one and I wanted a new one and I leased one. And I went with my brother to the dealership in Stevens Creek. And I remember like the guy comes out the lot and I was like, cool, this is the one I want. I was like, this is like black, the red interior. I love it. And I was like, oh, cool. And I was like, okay, could we actually like run numbers on this? He's like, absolutely. And I was like, just shooting the shit, just having communication with him. And I was like, how long have you been working here? And he goes, oh, this is actually only my second week. I was like, awesome. And I like looked at my brother and like kind of gave him that look like, I'm gonna eat this guy alive, right? Like I'm one of those weirdos that like actually likes like, I like sales to the point that I actually even like being sold to. Like sometimes even if I have a telemarketer come, like I'll just entertain it, just see their process, right? Like how are they doing it? Their follow-up. Like I love just being a learner, but I also like, I've always been so attracted to it. And I remember, I think I went like, I don't know. It was probably, I think it was like 8 rounds of no. Like basically like, this is what I heard a client got a car similar to this at this price. I got it basically no money down. I got the first month for free. And I want to say I got it like $280 off every month for the 3 years because I leased it. So like I did a lot of work on the negotiation, right? But like I knew that what I could take advantage of with this person was like the fact that he was so new. A, there's a little insecurity, and B, as someone that's new, I think about this like when I was a kid, I always wanted to make my parents happy. I wanted to impress my parents in my grades. I wanted to impress my parents in sports, and I still have that. Like I still get excited even as a 34-year-old male that like doesn't like obviously live with my parents and doesn't rely on my parents for absolutely anything, that I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess what I did, mom and dad. So I thought that I was like, okay, like there's going to be something that's like, this guy's just going to be excited to sell cars. Like he just like the first couple weeks or months, like they just want to pump numbers out. Fuck the deal. Right. And I knew that, right? So I was able to just stand my ground and say, no, no, no. And like, I knew I would eventually get to a place where like, I'm going to get the answer I want. And I did, right? Like I got the answer I wanted to. So like, understand that in communication, like you need to understand all these little pieces that are going to make a deal work or not work. Some of them I've like not gotten what I want. Some of them I've actually like the last car that I bought for my wife, like, I was actually like, oh, this is actually like a good price for like what it is. So I actually didn't even negotiate that hard. Got like a couple grand off the top. I think I got a free delivery, but like I really didn't push as hard as I maybe could have. I remember when I got my yes in like the second round, I was like, damn it. Like maybe I shouldn't push hard enough. But like for me having integrity, I was like, this actually is just like, it's a good price. Okay. So coming back to that next one, patience versus urgency, right? I think someone that is confident in what they do. I think about this with business a lot now, like Palo Alto more than Mountain View. Like Palo Alto's kind of been full for a while, where I don't really create a lot of urgency for people. I'm like, hey, like, honestly, we're full. So if this is something you feel is right for you, and like, obviously I'm very confident that we'll be able to solve what you're trying to solve for. If not, no big deal, right? Versus in the beginning, when I first opened up the business, I'm like, I have to make sales because if I don't have any clients, I'm going to have to unfortunately shut this business down. People lose their jobs. I lose a lot of money. I lose the investors' money. It was like a shit show. So I was operating with a lot more urgency of like, and just hustle, right? Like I just wanted to get shit done. Now, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but like now I'm like, okay, like, hey, Paulo, so it's like, it's at where it's at. And I've actually seen my closing rate kind of drop because I'm like, I'm not operating with as much urgency as possible, right? So when you think about tone, slowing it down, calm, warm voices, downward inflection, pausing, not having filler words, not talking fast. Like one of the things that I've always struggled with communication is I just always talk too fast. I just had to slow it down, right? Like slow it down, appreciate the hour of the communication, whatever time I have with that person, be confident in what I'm talking about, but learn to be good listener, right? Allowed me to slow the tone down. When I wasn't listening and I was like, I just need to tell you about what this is. I just need to talk about it. I wasn't doing that as well, right? Okay, so slower speech equals higher credibility. But a lot of people that think having the gift to gab, and talking fast is good. It's actually not. Pauses increases authority. Calm tone lowers cortisol because when you feel rush, your tone will give you that away, right? Okay, so the next one's words, why they matter, obviously. Language that builds trust. So I wrote down 4 things, and I actually have this kind of like in my sales training in a sense. Words guide direction, not emotion, right? Like the emotion I think is going to happen at an unconscious level and more nonverbal. So language that builds trust, like opening statements like help me understand, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, walk me through, versus language that would cause resistance would be like you should, that's wrong, the truth is, absolutes like always or nevers, like not using absolute words, like this person never does this person always does this, right? Like absolutes are obviously not in a reality, so people resist being told, they respond to being guided. So, and this kind of leads with that earlier statement of like we want to lead the conversation with curiosity, right? Curiosity is led by question-based frameworks, open-ended questions, not a yes or no question. Talk to me more about how that worked. Talk to me more about how you felt. Help me understand why you feel like you weren't successful with that, right? Like the framing behind the questions is led by curiosity, and it's in a way for me to hopefully, most importantly, understand the person. Like a lot of times, like, okay, I'll give you an example. It's not rocket science to understand that you should be training, you should be meal prepping, you should be going to bed at a consistent time, you should be, like we all know those things. But telling somebody to do something does not have as much impact around asking them why, first of all, they want to make change, why that goal is important to them. Is there an emotional hot button or trigger that's connected to it? And then asking them or helping yourself understand more of why do you think you have not been successful? And then letting them kind of explain that, right? Because like that frame allows you to kind of have them walk to the answer, right? Like you don't need to just be like, that's it, right? Some people feel like they're like, oh, I just need to be told what to do. Right? I even think about that with just life and experiences that we go through. Because like a lot of times I think we think like, oh, I just want the answers, right? Like ChatGPT especially. I mean, I like that nowadays with a lot of things. Like, just give me the fucking answer. Like what the reality is, the learning experience actually comes from the journey and the process and the learning. And when I think about communication, when I think about sales, when I think about me as a manager, I want that person that I'm talking to get there themselves, right? And by me allowing them to feel like they have a platform and they can communicate, where I'm listening, I'm empathetic, I'm asking questions that are open-ended, versus me just being like, fuck your feelings. This is what you need to do. I know this works for me. I know this works for everyone else. Even though that we might get to the same destination, one is going to create compliance through empowerment. The other one is going to maybe have this short-term compliance through, this is like the stick or the carrot, right? Like we want the carrot. We don't want the stick. I don't want to be whipping somebody into effect, right? And I think a lot about this, like I'm not a parent yet, but like a lot of the stuff that I've learned in this space through managing, through sales, through coaching, through everything that obviously I'm talking about in this episode, I think is really going to help me with communication. Like I don't want to just be a dad and a father to my kids and just like, you got to do this. It's because I said so, because I'm your dad. We all do that. I'm sure I'm probably going to say it plenty of times when I'm just like fed up with things, but I want to educate my kid and my client and my team and my wife and whoever I'm communicating with, I want to let them get there, right? And I want to just help be the guider. I'm like the tour guide. Like, hey, like I from the information I know and my experience, I know this kind of worked well for me, but let's help you get there, right? Like we go to a therapist because a therapist has a different lens on psychology, right? A therapist has an understanding of emotional therapy. They have a skill set that could solve your problem, but I'm not going, tell me the fucking answer, right? Like the therapist is there and just listening, asking questions, help me understand, walk me through. Why do you feel that way? Like they're asking things that are kind of leading that, right? So that's obviously a big thing that I think is really important for us to sound. Okay, next part that I have written down, sales and influence and psychology without being salesy. Big thing is remember, like I said, people are buying emotionally, not just logically. 95% of our decisions are at an unconscious, subconscious level. Three core buying drivers. This is another one kind of that I stole from my little thing that I have is number one, pain avoidance, right? A lot of us are making decisions because we're trying to avoid pain. I am making a decision to invest in learning sales because I am tired of being in pain of not closing. I'm tired of being in pain of not having enough money. I am joining a gym because I'm tired of being in pain with the lack of confidence. I'm tired of being in pain because my back hurts. I'm tired of being in pain because I'm 15% over on body fat. So there's pain, right? And the avoidance of pain is obviously going to be a big driver for a lot of decisions that we make. Number two, identity reinforcement. There's going to be a lot of things that I'll use kind of, what would be a good example? Clothing, cars, even for me a little bit. I think a lot of times people buy certain, the handbags or the designer clothes or the cool car or whatever it is. It's different for everyone. I'm just kind of using things that are just riffing off the top of my head. Those are reinforcing an identity. I want to be looking like somebody that is rich. I want to be looking like somebody that had whatever, right? Like you are reinforcing an identity, right? If someone wants to be healthier, we're going to make a buying decision to support those things. I spend money on supplements. I spend money on my trainer. I spend money on my sauna, whatever it is. You're reinforcing that identity. Third driver is going to be the belief in a better future self, which is obviously this idea that we're betting on ourselves. That's why we make a decision on most things that we spend money on. And when you think about this in relationship to just communication, pain avoidance, obviously, if I were to think about this like as a relationship, it's like I don't want to be in disagreements with my wife, and I don't like arguing, and I don't like her arguing. I mean, I can't speak for her. I'm pretty sure she doesn't like arguing, and I don't want to be in the pain of having that disagreement. I want to be in a relationship where we can have our differences of opinions, but we can come to a conclusion together, right? So we can avoid pain, right? I want to, the identity of us being a happily married couple that has our sets of opinions. Sometimes there's going to be a disagreement, but like there's going to be decisions that are going to be made that are kind of reinforcing the overall kind of identity that we're trying to have. And then most importantly is this the belief in the better future, right? Which I think a lot of us are really looking at. Another thing that I have that I basically write like problem amplify vision, which is kind of clarify the pain, right? This is why I always like to talk about when I'm talking to anybody in communication, I talk about history first. I talk about background. I talk about medical exercise history. I talk about, where they've been. So I want to clarify that because the history is going to expose pain because pain is generally going to come from things that have not worked, right? Show the cost of inaction, like what it costs as far as your emotions, your time, whatever it is to not take action, right? So I think about this with business stuff is like, do I invest in this thing that's maybe going to help me with marketing? What's the cost of it? The cost of inaction is like, well, maybe I stay exactly where I'm at. Maybe my business doesn't grow, right? Maybe I don't learn this. And maybe so there's always these things in life that I think come with the cost of inaction. And then the last one is obviously pain in the future state, right? What happens if nothing changes the next 6 months is obviously kind of in relationship to that inaction. Okay, so this one is a lot of stuff that I was excited to kind of learn. This was like, how are therapists trained to solve human problems, right? So I kind of went down that rabbit hole with that question. And they kind of gave me a couple therapy models that are simplified, right? So the number one was like client-centered therapy. This is by Carl Rogers, which is number one, empathy. Empathy comes from understanding or doing your best to understand where that person's at feeling-wise, emotionally, mentally, whatever that might be. Number two, always leading with non-judgment, right? Like if I'm trying to communicate with somebody, unless you're somebody that doesn't have the right intent and you're trying to manipulate somebody, this would be where you would lead without it, which hopefully no, you're never doing that. Is non-judgment, right? You want to make sure that like when you're talking to somebody that you're never judging what they did. I talk about this with like some of our processes. I always say that to everyone that's doing like fit starts. I'm like, don't ever talk about another business, another training model in a negative way, right? Like, and be like, oh, cross it, yeah, stupid. You're gonna blow your back out. Or Orange Theory, yeah, you're not getting like. There's things that maybe I trust me, I disagree with plenty of things. I'm like, that could be better, but I never want to make sure that I'm leading with judgment, right? So I do love that that's there because I think that's a big thing. And then the last one is just kind of emotional validation, where I like validate the emotion that somebody has. So when someone's leading with a problem, there's an emotion behind that problem, right? There's logic that hopefully we'll get towards, but I want to validate the emotion, right? So if I'm hearing this correctly, it sounds like it annoys you when whatever, right? Like, you can label it however you want and put the analogy towards anything. So the skill itself is just reflective listening, right? It sounds like you're feeling X, right? Being the thing that kind of was written down. Number 2 is cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Which is thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, which is reframing the disordered thinking that most of us have, right? So what that means is what's another way to look at this is kind of the question they put there, right? Which is when you think about your thoughts are then going to take you to an emotion, right? That emotion is then going to take you to a behavior that you're taking, right? Most of us that are trying to make change using therapy, using a trainer, in a discussion with your partner at home, talking to your kid, there is a behavior change that we are trying to get to. But if you were to reverse engineer that, there is a behavior that is stemming from an emotion, and there is an emotion that's stemming from a thought, right? So the reframing, I think, is a cool way to think about this is as a person that's communicating is what's a different way to us to look at this behavior that's happening? And how do I maybe tie in some of the emotions that you're having around it or your thought process behind it? And what's another way to look at what's going on, right? So that's kind of a cool way too that I liked about it. Number 3 was emotional interviewing, right? Used in addiction and behavior change and coaching. Rule being people change when they hear themselves say why. That's a big one. Not me telling you why. When you come to the answer yourself. So tools, open questions, not yes or no questions. Those are closed-ended. Affirmations, reflection items, and obviously summarizing. Number 4, nervous system, somatic work. So therapists watch breathing. They watch muscle tension. They watch eye movement, eye contact, and emotional regulation, right? This is a big one when you're talking to somebody as far as body language goes or even tone. It's you want to feel. That's where I was coming back to what are the continuum. I think I mentioned this, but I never really finished it. Of okay, in person's being the best. And then I'm okay, cool. Video calls are great because they can give us tone and words, FaceTime, those kind of things. A phone call is great because you can get at least tone and words. Video call, you get a little bit of body language, but you're missing, I think, some of that human, unspoken energy that's talked about. And then you think about things like text and emails, right? Out of all the things that are most misunderstood, or I've had this plenty of times with either a work thing or talking to my wife, sounds like you got a little attitude. I'm no, I think maybe that was the way it was taken, or it's just easy to think that because if I put an exclamation point behind something, it looks like I'm yelling at somebody. I just make that a bad habit. So it's we have to use little things like emojis or GIFs nowadays to kind of create a little bit of an energy change because it's so hard to really understand that level of communication. But in person, like I said, this is where I think I love the nervous system one because that for me is kind of touching onto the body language. It's just hey, breathing, muscle tension, eye movement, emotional regulation. Learn to get a feel of how that person feels. Are they uncomfortable? Are they tense? Are they nervous around you? Are they cocky in a way that they don't want to listen to you because you don't feel like you have the education or the answers? When I think about this, even some of the stuff that I talk about in the front end for what we do with prospects, I've had some clients that are very, very smart people, very analytical, very logical, very successful in their field. And I can tell in the beginning when I'm talking to them that they just don't, they almost feel like this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And sometimes what I say is I'm hold your ammo, right? I'll just keep leading with questions. I'll keep asking them. Sometimes they're just very short, shut off, one-word answers. Then what I do is when I go to then talk about us after I've talked about history, I've talked about goals and future, I talked about how I can actually fix the problem, I'll talk about us, I'll talk about the movement screen, I'll geek out. And I'll frame it in almost a way of well, I'm sure you probably understand this, but you've heard of this, correct? And I'll say it in a way that doesn't shut them down, but I'm I haven't heard them. Okay, no problem at all. Let me explain what this is. So ways where it's kind of okay, I can give you a little confidence. I know what the fuck I'm talking about when I'm talking about this. But then there's some things where it's some people fake it. If you don't know that, it's hey, I have no idea. So you can learn based off someone's body language. You can learn based off someone's response of okay, how am I actually going to keep controlling this or keep this discussion moving forward in a positive way, right? Okay, therapist strategies you guys can steal. Therapists do not interrupt big thing when people are talking. I make this mistake with my wife all the time. I'm better at this at work than I am at home, which is fucked up. Sorry, babe. So learning not to interrupt or apologize when you do. Number 2 is arguing facts. Someone's opinion can be a fact to them, so don't ever argue those, right? Number 3 is rushing to solutions, right? If you haven't gathered enough data, you haven't asked enough questions, you haven't led with empathy, you haven't led with open-ended things, you do not have a solution yet in that person's eyes. You need to build that rapport. You need to take that time. 4th one is you're forcing outcomes, right? Things that therapists do, right, is slowing the room down, naming the emotions, ask permission before advice, use silence intentionally. I love that 3rd one, asking permission before advice. Before I tell you what to do, you okay with me giving kind of an opinion of what I think is going to go on here? Right? Like, so immediately I'm already prefacing this kind of like discussion around like, do you mind if I give you like a quick little advice on like what I think? Right? Like, so just something that's like, hey, I'm asking for some type of permission before I give you the answer. Even though it's like, hey, you might have already would have like been talking about that. You might have already like, fuck it, made the decision. This is what it is. But silence intentionally, naming the emotion, slow the room. I love these things, right? So silence creates pressure. People fill it with the truth. Just to kind of like finish off all this stuff, these are kind of little notes that I stole from even just the sheet that I have here. So elite communication stack: body, calm, open, grounded; tone, slow, warm, confident; words, curious, reflective, non-threatening. Those are the big things. I think like the one thing I wrote is like, what are little things that you guys can take home to challenge yourself, right? It's like, number 1, slow your speech down. So when you're talking to somebody, slow it down, be a better listener, right? Interrupt less, let people talk, right? Understand that you're going to talk. You don't need to talk yet, right? The most powerful person in the room generally is the quietest one in the room. People that talk too much, they kind of always interrupt people. Those are generally the weaker ones, right? Summarize before responding. So listen to the information. From what I'm hearing, X has happened. This is what I'm thinking. Is that okay with you? Right? Exactly. Ask one more question than you normally would. The biggest thing, I call this the peeling the onion effect, is like when you're going to talk to somebody, don't get an answer and expect that to be the honest answer. There's always going to be this superficial covering that happens behind it. You need to make sure that you're getting the honest answer, which comes from actually peeling that onion back, right? So the best communicators don't convince, they create conditions where people convince themselves. Mic drop. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I think that's, for me, something I love talking about, something I've always been very passionate about, and I just want you guys to be able to take this and apply this to work, your relationships, your kids, management, coaching, interviews, finding a partner. Doesn't matter. It is the number 1 thing that I think will get you farther in life than any other skill that I've ever learned. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Take care.